Welcome to Business Owner Tales from the Trenches, the podcast for business owners who want to see around corners and thrive financially. Your host is Carr, CEO and business owner at CornerCap. Tune in every other week for lessons learned from the trenches of entrepreneurship, business successes, and financial independence. Here's Cannon.
Hello and welcome to today's episode. This is Carr and Claudia Bettinger alongside me, our producer. Claudia, excited to bring this program. This is all about deep knowledge about building a franchise that goes from small to large nationally, but also about scaling and growing your business with some great insights. So we are excited to get started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about our guest?
Yeah, today we have Omar Soliman, who is a published author, entrepreneur, and TV personality. He is a co-founder of Hunks Hauling Junk and Trash Butler, which is a junk removal and moving franchise with over 200 franchises across the country.
It's a great story, and we are excited to get started. Let me point out maybe three things to keep in mind as we go through the show. The first one is, if you're interested in learning about building a national franchise or even a local franchise, this episode brings some great economic and strategic insights and essentially a playbook at the various stages. And so listen in for that. It's great. Secondly, this program's been gives so much insight into what I'll call accelerators for your business. Whether it's third-party capital, whether it's PR and raising your visibility in the right ways at the right times. And Omar does such a great job talking about those accelerators. So listen for that. And of course, we'll be back at the end of the program to highlight some things there. And then finally, the third thing, Omar and his partner, Nick, are just such a great example of how a partnership survives. They were friends, right? And friends often don't make great business partners.
Absolutely.
But it works for them, right? And it's just some great insight into how that works. So sit back and enjoy the episode there. You know, if for us in particular, if you want to learn more about our work with entrepreneurs and small business owners, check us out at cornercap.com, learn a little bit more about our personal profit system, including our 3Rs dynamic planning method. So sit back and enjoy the episode with Omar Soliman. Omar, thanks for being on the show. I wanted to just go way back to the beginning. You know, I love how you got started because you, in a way, started what every high school or college kid, you know, kind of thinks of, right? Find a summer opportunity, recruit a couple of buddies, put some flyers out. I think you earned $8,000 in your first summer, but then things went a lot further than that. What worked for you? Why were you able to do what many on my street have not been able to do?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what happened. It was the summer before our senior year at college. We were home in Washington, D.C. for our summer break. My mom had this beat up cargo van that she would use for her furniture store. We borrowed it, and she actually coined the name College Hunks Will Haul Your Junk. That was what she said sitting around the dinner table. And I always say, as soon as she said it, it was like you could feel the earth move. It was just such a good name. And we all started laughing. That's the first reaction you get. But then we looked at each other and we're like, you know what? That's a pretty darn good name. So put some computer printout flyers around the neighborhood. We were in business. So we did it that summer and then went back to university. I was down in Miami. I was in undergraduate business school, and the professor announced a business plan contest. So enrolled a business plan for a year-round operation called College Hunks Hauling Junk, which ended up winning first place. So that's what gave us the confidence to start the business.
Yeah, well, it's awesome. And, you know, and I think you hit on a nugget to win that first prize, right? There, you know, I think you had 250 applicants, and, you know, your chances of winning might have been low, but you had a key point. I think you said, I'm going to approach this not as local people trying to move a business, move things, but more build a process. Was that really kind of the key?
Yeah, there was two things that were in my favor. One was that it wasn't just going to be a local business. From the very beginning, I'd envisioned a franchise system. So having franchise partners, I didn't know how to do it, but it was in the business plan, was to actually franchise the concept. The second thing was the fact that we actually did it that summer before. So a lot of the folks that were presenting businesses were just ideas, but I had the numbers. I proved that I'd made $8,000 to $10,000 that summer. There was a demand for the service. So I was able to answer a lot of the questions that the judges had. I think that's what tipped me over the edge.
Yeah. Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or did you kind of discover that quickly?
So that's a great question. When we were growing up, there weren't shows like Shark Tank or The Apprentice, or being an entrepreneur was not something that was talked about as it is today. So short answer, no. I did have a captivation towards business. I enrolled in the business school as an undergrad, but it really was that summer doing the work in the van where people would approach us and say, "Oh, this is a real entrepreneurial thing you're doing." And we'd kind of look at each other and say, "Oh yeah, it sounds pretty good. Entrepreneur. I like the sounds of that." So it was really that was the moment we found something that we were passionate about. Not that we were necessarily passionate about hauling junk or moving people. It was really the idea of running a small business and dealing with clients and marketing and all the things that go into it. So that was the aha moment, was actually doing it that summer before our senior year.
Yeah, just boots on the ground kind of experience. I know your mom owned her own furniture store, though, right? So you kind of grew up knowing maybe a little bit about what owning a business would be like.
Yeah, she did. So our dinner table conversations were often about the challenges of being a small business owner, dealing with employees, dealing with inventory. She was very much a small business. She did grow it. She went from one store to three stores and then down to one store. So I saw the whole gambit, and that was I didn't realize it at the time, but that was where I cut my teeth in terms of like business, and just hearing the discussions around the dinner table and just hearing what she had to go through day in and day out. So it was kind of my undergrad before undergrad in business.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, we're going to get more specific on your journey, but I want to, if now let's fast forward maybe to the end in a way. I mean, you've been able to start at least two businesses, right? But you've also written a couple books. You've produced some TV shows. You've been on TV. Some entrepreneurs find that one business that they're dedicated to. Others become serial entrepreneurs. In your view, is there a different mindset? What is the difference between those types of entrepreneur?
I think that for me, I can only speak for myself and my partner. I think that we have certainly entrepreneurial ADD, which
Mm-hmm.
can be good and can be bad. I think some of our mentors have told us you really can only ride one bicycle at a time. But we have certainly extended ourselves and sometimes overextended ourselves. And so we do have our core business, which is College Hunks, which has over 200 franchises across North America. We started a second business in 2013 called Butler, which is not a franchise. That business sells B2B waste contracts for multifamily communities. It's a doorstep valet trash business. And that business services about 300,000 doors today. So those are really the two main businesses that we're putting our effort and our time into. And we've certainly branched out to some other things, and we certainly don't shy away from PR. It's been a big way for us growing the College Hunks business. So we were on the very first episode of Shark Tank, which was a pretty awesome experience. And then just recently we were on Undercover Boss. And so, we're always looking for ways to plug the business. And we often say that our trucks have been on more TV shows than the Kim Kardashian or the Kardashians. We try to get those trucks. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll get a little bit more to the TV show side of things, but I wanted, as you started College Hunks and then also the trash business, how did when you started those, did you have kind of a grand vision of where you wanted those to end up, or if not, how has that vision evolved, and what's the definition of success?
Great question. We every 5 years we sit down and write a 5-year vision, and so. When I look back at that first vision, when we started in 2005 to 2010, what's pretty wild is a lot of that stuff has come true. And from 2010 to 2015, a lot of that stuff has come true. So we try to look at our vision in sort of 5 to 10 year increments and then work backwards from there. So short answer, yes. I mean, vision and casting that vision, I think, is our job as founders. Now, at the same time, we always call it a 20-year overnight success, because we certainly thought we'd be here a lot quicker. It's taken a long time, a lot of challenges, but casting that vision has been a big part of what we do.
Well, when you said you thought you'd be here faster, like what is here now? What how would that have tied to an original vision?
Right. So, I mean, the original, let's talk about franchising, because when we got into franchising, we certainly got into it with rose-colored glasses. You know, you
Right.
think franchising, you make a bunch of money and there's royalties, and yeah, look, McDonald's is doing it. They got a lot of money, but we were young guys that really didn't have much experience. And what we didn't know is that it takes a lot of money, a lot of capital, and close to 100 units before the franchise business starts to become royalty self-sufficient, which is sort of the benchmark in franchising for a successful business is once you can actually run the business on the royalties. And we didn't know all that. And we thought we would get to 100 franchises much quicker than we did. It took a long time to get to those first 100. The second 100 came a lot faster. So it's that flywheel effect, right? It's at some point in about 2014, our business hit a real tipping point. I think that's where the brand and the systems met. You know, in the early days, we had a great brand. You know, it got laughs, the colors were bright, but the systems didn't necessarily meet with the brand. And so we had a lot of sizzle, but we didn't have a ton of steak. 2014, 15, I think the sizzle and the steak came together, and that's where that tipping point happened.
And you'd really kind of started that franchise model, what, around 2005, 2006? Was that about right?
We started the business with one truck in 2005. We started franchising the business in 2008.
Okay. So it did take on that franchise model, it took about 6 years before you started to feel that flywheel effect. And does that mean you also weren't profitable during that period, or were you profitable up until then?
I mean, no, for a good part of that period, we were not profitable. We were very fortunate that we had a corporate store. So our first location in Washington, D.C. was throwing off enough capital to essentially fund the franchisor business. So had we not had that, we would have either had to go raise money or take on debt, and we didn't have to do either. But that was a huge piece, and I always, when I talk to prospective franchisors, I tell them, open 1 or 2 corporate stores. A, it's going to give you a proof of concept, and B, it can be the sort of the cash engine for your franchisor business.
Where does this ultimately head now? Like, do you another 10 years from now, where do you see this?
Yeah. So, I mean, we want to be $1 billion system-wide revenue business in 10 years. So today we are pushing close to 300. We'll be a little under that with over 200 franchises. So we essentially have to 3x the business in the next 10 years, 3x the revenue, and probably not 3x the number of franchisees. So it means more revenue in the markets that we're in and going deeper in the markets that we're in. And we play in 2 industries, moving and junk removal. It's a $20 billion sandbox. And so there is definitely meat on the bone. And so it's just going deeper within our markets.
Yeah. Well, and in that process, so it sounds like, in hindsight, it's worked well, maybe didn't go quite as fast. I'm curious, around that 2014 period, what gave you that flywheel effect? How did brand and systems finally get aligned? In other words, what did you figure out to do right that you hadn't figured out yet?
Yeah, it's also a great question. A couple things. There's a operating system we use called entrepreneurial operating system, or Traction, which I'm sure some folks you've spoken with.
EOS. Yeah, we use it. We have clients use it. Yeah.
Yeah. So EOS was a big part of it, right? I mean, that was like the first book we read that was the paradigm shift for us was The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. That was when we were 506. And the gist of that book, as you know, is work on the business, not in the business. And we were in the business. We were hauling the junk. We were talking to the clients, sometimes all at the same time. And then fast forward, the second book that I think was that big paradigm shift for us was Traction. And it really spoke to us because of that whole visionary integrator hat. And my partner and I realized that we are not integrators. We were trying to be integrators. I'm 100% visionary. My partner has some integrator personality and skill set, but it was still, both of us were trying to fit a round hole in a square peg, or just trying to make it work. And it really wasn't until we read the book, started implementing that operating system, and then actually finding our integrator, who today is our company president, Roman. So I think it was all those things coming together, right? It was the PR, the branding, and then bringing in this operating system, and then getting the people on the bus that could take our vision and actually integrate it and hold the team accountable and sort of build the brand. So that was really it.
So you hired Roman in right around 2014?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He just no,
And I
he just had
guess,
his and he just had his 10 year, so 2013.
yeah, 2013. So,
Yeah.
so he basically filled a skill gap that you and your partner
Yeah.
realized that, uh, you didn't have, right?
Yeah, exactly. Nick and I, we are certainly we have ADD, right?
Hmm.
We can sit in a room and come up with 100 ideas, and that might be good to some extent, but that's not going to necessarily incrementally grow the business. And we needed that person that could incrementally grow the business, who could take our 100 ideas and maybe flush them down to one or two ideas, and could also be a tiebreaker between Nick and I, and be that other pragmatic person in the room with two sort of visionaries to help us bring everything in and land the plane. So yeah, he came on board as a financial controller first in 2013, and then worked his way up to become the brand president a few years later.
Yeah. So, how long did it take you to find him, by the way?
Well, it's a great story. I love telling it because
Hmm.
he was a senior at University of Tampa and did a case study competition on College Hunks,
Oh, really?
and he actually presented to us. We were probably had a dozen franchisees at the time, and he stood out. I mean, he brought the numbers, he presented really well. And one of the things he did say was, one day I'm going to be running your company. I'm going to be the president of your company. And we chuckled, we're like, yeah, that sounds good. Sure. But he kept approaching us and said, hey, what do I need to do to get a job with you? And we're like, look, we don't have anything, maybe go get a CPA or get an MBA. He ended up getting
Yeah.
both. He got a CPA and an MBA, and then circled back, and it was serendipitous. We had a financial controller who left, and then my partner Nick met him for lunch, and it just kind of all came together. And that was 2013. And he was a missing piece, a missing link in the soup, or a missing ingredient.
Yeah, no, that's such a great story. And it, I often ask this, for our guests, is it luck or is it skill that brings all this together?
There's a little bit of luck. It's persistence. I mean, I think Roman's story is truly a story of persistence. It embodies that persistent mindset, because he kept following up. He
Hmm.
kept following up. He kept coming to our office. He would send LinkedIn messages. So his story is that of persistence. I think it was luck that we happened to be doing a case study at his school, and he happened to be, in that class, right? But I think it's when we look back at it, there's a lot of lucky moments, but it's really, at the end of the day, it's that persistence that gets you through.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about just disruptions that always happen. Every entrepreneur who's growing a business encounters something that they didn't expect, beyond their control, or maybe it is their control. They didn't realize it, that disrupts things for them. Tell us, in that journey, over there, those one or two times where you're like, we didn't see that coming, that it sets you back and you have to pivot, on the vision a little bit. Did that ever happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I started in '03 with the van, there was no Facebook, there was no social media. When we started in '05 with the one truck, Facebook had just been out, I think, for a year, maybe.
Mhm.
The way that companies like ours advertised was in the yellow pages. So that was it. It was, you take out a full page ad if you had the money in the yellow pages. Google advertising wasn't really that big. So looking back from '05 to today, I mean, there's been some huge disruptions, paradigm shifts, so society changes, just the way that we search for things. So it started with like Google AdWords, and then social media and social advertising, and now you've got, heavy digital and behavioral advertising, and just and then obviously AI is sort of the
Mhm.
next frontier. So we've tried to be, I wouldn't say we're on the bleeding edge.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, we're still, somewhat of a bricks and mortar business, and we try to keep it simple. But
Right.
we've had to go through a lot of these different, what you might call, disruptions in the marketplace,
Mhm.
and use them as opportunities, really.
Yeah, well, but the fundamental economic model and franchise model you've used through the years sounds like it's basically stayed the same, right? That has not
Yeah.
been disrupted, those
From that, no,
economics.
it's, franchising. It's funny. It's people say, well, what's changed in franchising? Well, the funny thing about franchising is nothing's changed. I mean,
Yeah.
the model from the '70s and '80s is still the same model. It's, you got to have profitable franchisees. You have to drive franchisee unit economics. You obviously have to open more franchisees, and then you have to have a management team that's able to manage that team and that brand. So that has all stayed the same, and it's very much a relationship business. It's very much a people business. So despite all these technological advancements, franchising as a whole has pretty much stayed the same.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned a couple times, though, I won't use the word failure, but there definitely, you said there were things where you maybe overextended, maybe made a decision that took you in a path you had to unwind. One of those I remember, I think it was on Shark Tank, where you were pitching college foxes packing boxes, which is also
Right.
an awesome name. Why won't a business work just on a name? Do you count that as a failure, or is there something that didn't work there, or is there another example of overextended that didn't work?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That one was that certainly didn't work. So yeah, you could call it a failure. It certainly worked great on TV, and we pitched that to the Sharks, and they immediately wanted to invest in college hunks and not that one. But I mean, in terms of failures, those are just things that I think happen. I won't say daily, but it's many times a year there are failures, whether it's awarding the franchise to the wrong person, hiring the wrong person, investing in the wrong technology, making some changes within your operating model that don't end up working. It's failure it's just part of the business, right? I mean, it's an everyday thing.
Well, have you been able to fail fast in that regard? I mean, it's easy to say fail fast, but I find entrepreneurs have a hard time backing off what didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, we're big proponents in that. I'm certainly a huge proponent in fail fast, test fast, fail fast. The challenge is when you're a smaller enterprise, it's easier to do that, right? The ship is smaller. You can change courses much quicker. And as you get bigger, you can't do that as easy. So you really need that sophisticated management team to help you come up with things that you're going to come up with, be committed to those things. And you can't just be changing course willy-nilly like you might as a startup or as an emerging business. So that's where the team and the people come into play, is having A players on the team that will push back on you on certain things and will be able to actually make the right decisions. And if they're not the right decision, have that culture where they'll say, hey, this isn't working, let's cut it off. But it becomes more challenging as the business gets bigger.
Yeah. Well, and let's, going back to some of the early days too, just in terms of mindset, like you'd mentioned, you had to learn what the royalty model was as a franchise, right? And you had to learn what it meant to actually have a professional management team and all that. Were there ever moments of doubt where you're like, I know on the ride you were like, I can't believe this is working, this is great. But were there ever those moments of doubt at night where you're like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be here?
Yeah, I mean, when we started franchising, it was 2008. So the Great Recession hit right as we were probably had about 6, 7 franchises sold. And I mean, you're talking about just the floor going out from under you, because our business is very tied to the housing market. When people are moving, they're decluttering. Back then, we didn't even offer moving services. So it was just hauling junk. And so I remember those early meetings that we would have looking at franchisee performance and looking at the company revenue, like this keeps getting worse by the day. And there was definitely those moments where we need our franchisees to do more revenue if we're going to survive. So going from that in 2008, we had to deal with COVID. COVID ended up sort of being a net positive because of the people moving, but there was those 6 months, where it's like, all right, revenue could be zero. It was zero for a couple of those months. So it's one of those things. I would say, like, if business is hard. If it was easy, we'd all be on yachts. We'd all be like Jeff Bezos. It's not. Business is hard. And the things that I hear business owners talk about is, it's hard to find people. There's a lot of competitors, everyone's price shopping. And it's like, well, if you think your business is hard, come spend a day with us, because we literally have thousands of competitors. We're hiring, a lot of young people that are coming into an office at 6 a.m. to basically drive giant trucks around town, doing a job that you wouldn't do for your best friend, right? So it's like all those things combined makes it's challenging. There's a level of organized chaos to it, but that's where the operating system, the culture, hiring people for attitude, all those things allow us to succeed. And I always describe franchising, especially our industry, is like a football team. And our leaders are head coaches. Our franchise owners are the head coach, the Nick Saban, the Bill Belichick of the football team. They got their headset on. They might have their special teams coordinator, offensive coordinator, but they're out there recruiting every day, empowering the culture, empowering the players, certainly calling some of the plays, but working on the business, right? They're not in there running the routes. And so it's a great model for someone that has that head coach type. And a lot of head coaches have become great managers and franchise in our business. Yeah.
Well, so it is a competitive industry, and just real quick, how are you different? Why are you able to stay ahead of a fragmented competitive industry?
Yeah, it's a lot of reasons. There's certainly technology and the calls. We have a call center that fields all of the calls on behalf of our franchise owners. So it allows our franchisees to work on the business. They're not dealing with customer calls. They don't have to staff a sales team. Our call center is almost 24/7, right? So we're fielding these calls nonstop, booking the appointments. A franchise owner can log in, see their schedule, see their trucks and resources, track their average job size, all this technology that allows them to run their business on top of the sort of the frontline technology of managing a decentralized team, from training and all these things. So there's that aspect. There's obviously the brand, and we're a known brand, we're a recognizable brand, culture, and then we offer more than just one service. So it's a one-stop shop for anybody that's going through a life-changing event. You need stuff moved, junk hauled away, labor in your home, we can do it.
Yeah. Well, we'll shift a little bit. You've been able to grow and scale a business, in an incredible way over the last 15, 20 years. So let's talk a little bit about managing capital and a little bit about managing profitability and growth. So, on the capital side, I mean, how should a founder like you, how would you advise entrepreneurs who are earlier in the journey to think about third-party capital, to think about bootstrapping? Because initially, were you just kind of relying on the cash from the business? And I think you said, actually, even when you got up on your skis, that corporate office was funding a lot internally. So maybe you haven't even tapped third-party capital, or leverage. But tell us a little bit about how you used capital during that growth journey.
Yes, another good question. And so, yes, for us, for College Hunks, it was organic. It was all hand to mouth, very, very, very bootstrapped. And being a de novo entrepreneur and founder, I think it was a great way to learn, because it forced us to work with a budget. And sometimes you didn't have the budget, so you had to do more with less. And you had to be patient, and you had to be very selective about what you spent your money on. And I think that's great. That sharpened our acumen as business owners and executives. That said, if I was going to do it all over again, I would probably raise capital, because now I know what I know, and I could deploy that capital and move much quicker than I could if I was bootstrapped. So our second business, Trash Butler, has taken outside capital. We've done a Series A and a Series B round, and that allows just, I think, velocity of growth. And once you're able to truly manage a balance sheet and a P&L and deploy capital strategically, then taking that outside capital becomes just makes things move faster. It's that rocket that can help you grow.
Well, and to put Trash Butler in context for us then, so you started that one, I think in 2013, you said, or 2014?
Yeah.
And when did you take on third-party capital, the Series A round, for example, and what told you were ready for it?
Yeah, so that one started out very much as like a side business. So it was, at the early days, it was actually going to be part of College Hunks, but it became apparent it was just too different. So we ran it for 1 or 2 years as just like a side gig. But then once it started to get some traction, I think it was 2017, we did a seed round. And the seed round was with a VC firm here in Tampa. What was the catalyst for that? I think we just saw that, like, all right, I think we were at about 15 to 20,000 doors under contract. There was some decent revenue, and we're like, we can really take this to the next level if we can get some cash, and then get some strategic folks in the room to help us. So that was what was the catalyst. And then we started growing very quickly from there. And certainly the more you grow, the more you spend. And so that was what was the, catalyst for the Series A and then the Series B.
Did did you use any debt along the way there, or was it all equity capital?
For that one, it was all equity capital.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so let's think a little bit then. So balancing profit and growth, how do you think about that? Some businesses that are scaling rapidly, they'll bootstrap, then they'll get third-party capital, equity, and then they'll be unprofitable for a while as they really kind of scale for growth. But others, like you learned at first, you made a great point. By bootstrapping, you had to be on a budget, you had to be selective. It taught you the business better than anything else. How do you prioritize constant income and growth where you invest?
Well, it's changed too. So, I think 3 or 4 years ago, I might have had a different answer because 3 or 4 years ago, it was all about growth. And folks, were getting crazy valuations and able to raise money or sell for, valuations that we don't have today. I think now it's going back, the pendulum swinging back to the economics, right? It's like you have to run a profitable, cash flowing business that is EBITDA positive. Obviously, it takes time to get there, but that's the goal. Like you got to make the numbers work. And that's what is happening in the marketplace is a lot of these companies that might have raised on a seed round or venture round, they're not showing it. And they're going to have to deal with a down round or, because the economics
have changed. That's a great point. Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, there's that M&A cycle, right? And so that's some of it too, right? Take it when you can, but and then if it's not there for you, something's changed, it'll send you back to the old days, I guess. Managing.
I think it's like the economics, right? I mean, if you can build a case for why your economics are not cash flowing or not EBITDA positive today, and it makes sense to the big brains that are in PE or in investors, then it makes sense. But they can kind of see through the BS. So it's like, and in today's market, they're going to really see through the BS. So you at least have to be able to build a case that shows that this business can be self-sufficient and cash flowing and EBITDA positive at X date with X revenue and with Y expenses. And so that's I think where we're at today. Whereas a few years ago, you could probably get a big round on just a dream.
Yeah, I know exactly. So, well, I want to get to the visibility on TV, but first, just as part of this, I mean, what have you learned about managing your own personal wealth and personal finance away from the business, right? In this journey, because I remember when you first that summer, you got $8,000, and you said you spent it all, right? As every young kid would. So, what have you learned just about creating liquidity and wealth alongside the business through the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need a professional management team in your business, you need professional advisors for your personal, right? Whether it's attorneys or financial wealth advisors, family office advisors, people that have done it before that know, great entrepreneurs don't necessarily manage we have different risk tolerance than most people. And so like, we need someone to bring us back to earth, and we don't like to deal with admin, and we don't like to deal with, paperwork and trusts. It's like, we want to just focus on growing our business. And so I think having a professional team around you, just like you in your business, I think that's the key. I've certainly made a lot of mistakes, invested a lot when I've had my liquidity events into deals and venture deals and businesses that I should probably not have invested in. And so I think after making those mistakes, I've deferred most of those decisions to a professional team that will analyze the deals or find deals if that's what I want to do. But, there's going to be a million people approaching us with business, right? And we have to say no 99.9% of the time. Otherwise, we'll be broke. So,
well, you've highlighted such an interesting thing there. I mean, because you're right, entrepreneurs love to kind of find that new deal, and they have friends who show them things. And you're right, you learn the hard way most of the time that side investment you did probably wasn't the best use of that capital, right? So it's no, those are great points. Well, let's talk a little bit about the TV side of things, because you've said that helped raise the visibility of the two businesses you have, particularly the College Hunks business. So what pushed you into TV? And you've done 8 or 10 different TV series. I know you mentioned the Undercover Boss. You mentioned Shark Tank. What pushed you into the TV side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that pushed us towards PR was when we first started in Washington, D.C., when we had, I think, one truck, maybe two. The Washington Post did an article. This was back when print media was still big. The Washington Post did an article in the Metro section. It was a front page article about our business. And, it went from our phone ringing 2 or 3 times a day to 40 times a day. And it was that, oh wow moment that
Wow.
like, wow, this PR is serious, so that was like the aha moment for us. And then it became, someone told us one day, like, look, PR is sales. Every morning reporters wake up all over the country thinking to themselves, what am I going to write about today? You have to be talking to them and pitching them on different angles, because there's a million angles that you can pitch a reporter on. So it started with that, and just really looking at PR as a sales tactic. And then the big break, for lack of a better word, was our director of franchise support came into our office one day and said, hey, check out the Inc. magazine. There's a little thing in the back of the magazine that says entrepreneurs wanted for a TV show to pitch a business on ABC. We're like, oh, perfect. We'll pitch a business. And so it was like, made of tape. We sent it in for because at the time they would take a percentage of the business, whether they invested it or not. That was in the contract. So we're like, well, let's not pitch College Hunks. Let's pitch College Foxes packing boxes.
I see.
We still plug in the business. And, we thought it would be, we still were going to take money. We thought it was a viable business, and we, went in there looking to raise capital. But that was an aha moment. And then Shark Tank, I think, raised even more brand awareness for us. It was the very first season, episode 1. It's certainly become more popular now, but at the time it was just a random show that no one had heard of. But that was it. It was just seeing the impact. And I think our brand is very visual. Yep. Our colors are orange and green. It's a people brand. It's a direct to consumer business. So, it plays well with that.
Yeah, you're aligned. Those programs align with your audience and your buyers and labor force and all that. So, by the way, appearing on Shark Tank, did that get the same kind of lift the Washington Post numbers did for you?
It did. It did. With franchisees too. I think we probably ended up opening 15 franchises over the past 10 years since the show's been on, because they run the reruns too. So it's like, every time it's on late night CNBC, you'll see the website traffic go up, or you'll see some leads come in. So it has been very impactful. It's the Shark Tank effect is what they call it now, is like these brands that go on, especially the consumer brands, like, the product, maybe home service, but really the product brands seem to be the ones that benefit. We should have just a product, maybe.
No, it's awesome. You're the second guest we had on the show that has been on Shark Tank, and yeah, I mean, if you get on it, even if you don't get a deal out of it, it can help launch. And I think in both cases, neither one took the deal, right? On our show, on our podcast here. So that's awesome. So it's just a sidebar. I got to ask: when you went on Undercover Boss, did you actually learn something new about the business, or did you already know whatever you found out?
I would say, so Undercover Boss is a wild experience. I tell people it was the hardest thing I ever did in my life, because it's 2 weeks and you're flying all over the country. And it's truly like, these people don't know, like they do everything they can to make sure that these people don't know. And they're a British production company, and they have these different stories that they pitch, and they actually pull it off. So I would say what I learned is more so about the people. Like, wow, there's people in our business, in our that work for our company, that are dealing with all types of life issues. We had a single mom that had like 4 kids, 2 were special needs. She was living in a home that gunfire was going off. Like, we couldn't shoot there because of like someone had just got shot outside of her house. It's like, wow, like these people bleed orange and green. They like loved our brand. And then you see what they have, what they're dealing with on their day-to-day life. Yeah. It was like, that was for me, the eye-opening piece. So
it's not like you learned anything necessarily to fix the business, but you got some deep insight into kind of the people involved with it.
I would say, you get some little things about the business, but the true deep insight is about the people. It's the people.
That's amazing. Well, the last question for you, just, you and Nick have been lifelong partners. I think
Yeah,
going back into like 10th grade, 8th grade, lifelong either football partners, business partners in trouble. What's the
right.
secret for you guys staying together like you had? Because I'm sure you've had disagreements. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
what's the secret to making a long partnership like that work?
Oh man, it's such a great question. That's you hear all the horror stories, right? The
Yeah.
partnerships that fail, the family members that go into business with each other, that hate each other. I think that one is a combination of luck, being that our personalities just match really well, and that our strengths, we don't have the same strengths, and we have different weaknesses, and they both happen to just like perfectly coalesce. Second, I'd say having a common vision and values. Like we both agree with where the business is going. We might disagree on some of the tactics, or we might, yell at each other about this or that, but there's no question that I know where he wants the business to go and he knows where I want the business to go. And then the other one is, just conflict. Like we don't shy away from conflict. We embrace it. So we'll call each other out. Sometimes we might sound like a bickering married couple to our the rest of the team, but we'll yell at each other, and then we'll go out for drinks that same night. So I use the sports analogies a lot. I overuse them, but it's just like being on a team, right? You got the quarterback and the wide receiver, and they might yell at each other about a play, but it doesn't change the respect or the vision. They both want to win championships, and that's really it. It's just having that common vision and values, being able to have healthy conflict, not letting things dwell, right? Like just calling it out when you feel it and see it. Just have the conversation. That's been what's worked for us.
Yeah, it's magic. Well, and I guess too, just having that foundational base of where you guys, going back playing football together, knowing you can count on each other in some way, and even when you make some stupid mistake or something. So
That's right.
that's
That's
really
right.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, it's just last question for you. What is next for you? I mean, like, do you have capacity to add a third venture in some way? Are you kind of like, nah, it's time to move on to other personal things? And you don't have to go into details on it, but as you think about it, what's the next 5 years
Yeah.
like for
So, I
you?
mean, College Hunks and Trash Bowler are those are the two horses that we're riding,
Yeah.
to the finish line. That's where we're putting our blood, sweat, and tears into. We have invested in another business called Kiddo Kinetics, which is
Hmm.
a youth sports franchise, mainly for kids under the age of 10, which I think that really meshes with our values and vision and just empowering leaders and building leaders. And that business has 60 franchises today and is growing pretty well. That one we're passive investors, we're on the board, but the core sort of focus for us is going to be getting College Hunks to $1 billion and getting Trash Butler to triple the door count that we're at now. That's where we're, spending our time.
Yeah, awesome. Well, best of luck doing that. We'll stay alongside you for the journey there.
Thanks, Ken.
Omar, really appreciate you joining us on the show here. It's been awesome. You've really given
I
some great
appreciate it.
insights and making us all better. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, welcome back to the show. Cannon and Claudia here. We've got a couple things we thought we'd point out, but first, Claudia, I'm still smiling after that episode. What'd you like about it?
I mean, personally, one of my favorite things is an undercover boss fan. It was really interesting to hear some of the behind the scenes and really understand what he learned and took away from the show. So I thought that was really cool. And then, we talk a lot about, is it luck or is it skill that gets these entrepreneurs and CEOs to where they are at? And I really loved his answer of it's persistence, and that if you keep following, you're going to end up at the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Shout out to his, I think now brand president,
Yes.
Roman, who, earned that job the hard way. And it's just such a great lesson for all of us. I love your great point about the persistence and undercover boss. Yeah, so much fun. Well, I wanted to jump in and just think about this concept of accelerators, right? We often talk about it, in some other episodes, but, how do you accelerate your business, which means how are you scaling it for growth and when, right? Because you can do things that will actually backfire on you if it's not set up the right way. So there were two areas that we really covered here. One was about use of third-party capital, right? And, the role that can use at the right time with the right foundation to grow your business and scale it. And, starting with College Hunks, that's now a 20-year-old business.
Right.
They basically bootstrapped, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He talks about how bootstrapping made him so creative. It allowed him to start kind of slow and and scale up to the perfect model because of what he learned. And it reminded me a lot about our last episode with Dave Sutton. You know, he talked about bootstrapping in his first business and what the lessons he was able to learn from that, you know, and the creativity that you gain.
Yeah. And then I know your point too. Dave made a great point.
Yes.
I wish I had used debt earlier because I could have scaled my business faster. Right. And then in ensuing businesses, he actually used debt to do just that. And it's interesting because, Omar makes that great point on College Hunks, the same point. Basically, he said, you know, if I'd had debt earlier, I might have grown College Hunks faster, but I don't think it would have worked quite yet. Would you agree?
Yeah, I don't think either. I think that, you know, he had to learn the lessons of bootstrapping in order to be successful and be where he's at now.
So he had to perfect the model first. And this is such a key point. You've got to perfect the model first, and you've got to learn how your balance sheet works.
Right.
Dave Sutton makes the same point, and then Omar today makes the same point, because then when you understand your business and understand the profitability model, you can use third-party capital, whether debt or equity, to grow the business. And so with Trash Butler, he did just that, right? He talked about how it started as a side business, but by its third year, they did their first seed round of equity with the real purpose of accelerating that business. And, you know, it's grown into a national business now, I guess about 10 years later for that, but about half the time of College Hunks.
Exactly.
So a great example of that. And, you know, just as a sidebar too, just the mindset, you know, you can see, we often explore in these programs the difference between a serial entrepreneur and a business owner just doing one consistent business. And both are great. Both can create a lot of value. But the serial entrepreneur steps in a little bit more and looks to scale and raise capital to accelerate a business and exit it and probably move on to the next thing. So great points by Omar. You know, with Dave Sutton, that was episode 24. Paige Wilson, also episode 20 at NeighborForce, talked about getting the model right. And then after the first 2 or 3 months, then she went and got venture capital funding too, to accelerate the business, to basically take advantage of a window in the market before others could get in. And it's another great example. So love that. The second concept on the accelerator that we talk about in this program is PR and how it raises visibility for you in the right way, right? But you have to have it aligned the right way. I loved, you know, and just listen to Omar talk about it. They had a kind of a bold, playful, experimental way of looking into PR, and they were open to it's not like they went into an opportunity saying, hey, this, you know, let's try this. It was, they would see something interesting, willing to experiment with it, but there was purpose behind it. And I think there were two underlying things that made it work. One is it was authentic to, you know, the different media were authentic to their customers, their employees, their stakeholders, the brand. So that authenticity has to be right. And then they measured and tracked it.
Right. I mean, he talks about how he still gets more traffic to the website when reruns of Shark Tank air, you know, and that he said that was the first episode of the first season. So, I mean, it's
incredible
crazy how
effects.
It still continues to work for them.
So, you know, so for their Washington Post exposure in DC, they had an immediate lift, right? 40 calls a day after that. Shark Tank, immediate lift. And like you said, even echoing years later. So the concept of accelerators is just something great to think about as you grow your business. The other thing just here that I thought was just such a great example was how he and Nick have stayed together for well over, I'm going to guess, 25 years now at this point. I know I think they met in middle school. Friends often don't make good partners, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we hear stories all the time of business partnerships that fall out. Someone has to buy the other one out. But, you know, I think that what he talked about, the communication, sharing the values, sharing the vision, that's really kept them together. Yeah,
I think it boils down to three things, right? One is, that personal foundation and values, common value system, like you mentioned. There is a healthy mutual respect that they have for each other. And then they do share a common vision. And I'll even add, you know, he mentioned they have complementary skill sets. You know, I don't think a partnership has to have that. But, you know, with the values, respect, and vision, I mean, in a way, it's kind of obvious, but at the same time, without it, it fails. And because there's always going to be conflict, there's always going to be details that you disagree on, but it's less likely to break things down when you have trust, respect, and common values. So great principles to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
Well, Claudia, another great episode. Thanks for joining me on it, and we will see everyone on the next one.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Are you looking for more resources to help your business? Visit cornercappodcast.com for our free ebooks to help you plan for inevitable transitions in your business. Tune back in every other week for a new episode.